Hey watchers, prepare yourself to enter a psychedelic headspace like you've never experienced. Today's episode is a dark journey into the minute fabric of human existence, so stick on those brain electrodes and fill up the isolation tank because it's time for the 1980s science fiction horror film, Altered States. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic, cult, and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Josh Baruto, and we review movies that are at least 10 years old. Fair warning, we're big on spoilers here, straight from the get-go.
We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. And number 4, is it a midnight watch?
What is a midnight watch? It's a film which completely captures your attention, drawing you in. No matter what time or what part you start watching the movie, you have to finish it.
All right, Altered States. This is one movie that I wanted to review since we even started talking about podcasting, and it's like right up there on the top of the list of movies that we were interested in initially to record. I think it was like number 3 on the list or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was an early one that you picked to do.
It's funny. I've actually only seen this movie twice. That's including rewatching this movie for this review, which is funny. I actually own this movie on DVD. I just never watched it again. I always intended to, but I hadn't until we finally reviewed it. So,
wow.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and drop some information on this. This came out in 1980. It was directed by Ken Russell. The screenplay was by Paddy Chayefsky, who also I didn't know this, but Paddy Chayefsky, this is based off his book. It's the only book he ever wrote, and I didn't know that he's also the screenwriter for the movie Network. So he was like an Academy Award-winning screenwriter. When I saw this movie, I thought this movie was, before I watched it, I thought this was just like a forgotten film that people didn't really know about, and so when I watched it, I just was like, oh my god, what did I just watch? This is amazing. So it was a few years ago, and let's see here, the budget was $15 million and the box office was $20 million, so it wasn't a bomb, but it didn't really, it made money, but it was, there's no sequel for a reason. So
right,
and let's see here, score was by John Corigliano. I butchered that last name, but this Red Bull's not working yet.
Oh man,
let me try that again. Let's see, John Corigliano. You think with me being Italian, I should be able to read Italian last names.
Dude, we've said this before. We are the worst Italians ever.
yeah. It's like. Yeah, it's like, what are you going to eat tonight? Spaghetti. Yeah, if we can't say anything right.
We're just super Americanized.
I guess
that's
so.
The problem.
Yeah, we're the Italians. Let's see here.
Italians. That's how Grandpa always said it.
The Italians. Yeah.
Right, when he was making fun of bad Italians.
He didn't know he was speaking to us.
Right.
This stars William Hurt, Blair Brown, Bob Balaban, Charles Hyde. It's Drew Barrymore. I wouldn't say Drew Barrymore stars in this. She has one line in this movie.
Right. Yeah. I know. I didn't even realize that was her.
Me neither.
When I watched it until as soon as they said it, I'm like, oh, she's one of the kids.
Right. Exactly. And yeah.
And it's probably her first screen appearance, I guess, in a major movie. But that's. Yeah, starring, that's a bit of a strong statement.
That just goes to show you how most of these actors didn't really do anything to become A-list actors after this. She's number 5 on the billing list in the 2021 list of people in this movie.
Right.
So I was got to say, so this was her first movie, her screen debut, and looks like this was also William Hurt's first screen appearance, which I was really surprised at that because he's the main guy in this movie, and
right.
I think he just comes out in this movie swinging like pretty hardcore. I was really impressed with this. If this is his first film,
Oh, I agree.
So, Josh, where were you the first time you watched this movie?
Well, Jeremy, I was quarantined in my father-in-law's RV getting over COVID-19.
Before you said COVID-19, that just sounded like the beginning of a horror movie. I was quarantined in my father-in-law's RV.
No, the only horror was me slowly going insane by being quarantined away from my family.
Yes. Cabin fever.
Yeah, absolutely cabin fever. So yeah, I didn't know anything about this movie. Other than that, you were super excited about wanting to do it. Like you said, even when we were first starting the podcast last year, you were super pumped about it. And I had not seen it before until just a few days ago.
Nice. Yeah, the first time I watched this movie was probably six years ago or something like that. And
okay.
Yeah, I was just on a kick just trying to find like weird 80s movies that I hadn't seen before. And I'd seen the poster for this movie when I was just on different websites. And so I finally was like, you know what, I'm just going to watch that because I didn't hear anything about this movie before I saw it. I didn't know anything about it. I thought that this movie was just like going to be terrible. And so my expectations for this were super low. And I definitely had, they way surpassed my expectations on this film. So,
okay.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. Do we want to just... to hit that synopsis and then dive into it?
Yeah, let's do it, man. All right. Thank you, Wikipedia, for doing the heavy lifting here. Edward Jessup is a psychopathologist. There we go. I know how to read. Edward Jessup is a Edward Jessup is a psychopathologist who, while studying schizophrenia, begins to think that our other states of consciousness are as real as our waking states. Edward begins experimenting with sensory deprivation using a flotation tank aided by two like-minded researchers, Arthur Rosenberg and Mason Parrish. At a faculty party, he meets fellow whiz kid and biological anthropologist Emily, and the two are eventually married. 7 years later, Edward and Emily have two daughters, are on the brink of divorce, and reunite with the couple who first introduced them. When Edward hears of the Hinchi tribe, whose members experience shared hallucinatory states, he travels to Mexico to participate in their ceremony. During the climb up into the Hinchi Hill Country, a plateau covered in spectacular mushroom-shaped venifex, Edward is told by his guide, Eduardo Echeverria, that the Hinchi use in their ceremonies a potion containing the sacred mushroom Amanita muscaria and the shrub Sinichui, or Latin name Hemia salicifolia, which they are collecting for next year's ceremonies. Totally butchered those. The tribe calls...
I was going to say, I had it easy, apparently.
The tribe calls Hemia salicifolia by a Hinchi name meaning first or primordial flower, in recognition of the deep memory states which it can evoke. An indigenous elder, the Brujo, is seen with a root, presumably intended to be a Hymenia root, in his hand, which he asks Edward to hold before cutting his hand in order to add some drops of his blood to the mixture he is preparing. Immediately after consuming the mixture, Edward experiences bizarre, intense hallucinations, including one of the petrification and subsequent erosion by blown sand of Emily and himself. The following morning, Edward leaves the Hinchi Plateau under a cloud, having killed, while in his intoxicated state, a large specimen of the Hinchi's sacred monitor lizard, which a petroglyph shown in the dream sequence shows that they believe to have given them the sacred mushroom in the mythic past. He returns to the U.S. with a sample of the Hinchi potion for analysis by his colleagues and further self-experimentation, and continues taking it in order to take his exploration of altered states of consciousness to a new and higher level. When toxic concentrations of the substance make increased dosage dangerous, Edward returns to sensory deprivation, believing it will enhance the effects of the substance at his current dose. Repairing a disused tank in a medical school, Edward uses it to experience a series of increasingly drastic visions, including one of early hominidae. Monitored by his colleagues, Edward insists that his visions have externalized. Emerging from the tank, his mouth bloody, frantically writing notes because he is unable to speak, Edward insists on being x-rayed before he reconstitutes. A radiologist inspecting the x-rays says they belong to a gorilla. In later experiments, Edward experiences actual physical biological de-evolution. At one stage, he emerges from the isolation tank as a feral and curiously small-statured, light-skinned caveman, going on a rampage through some streets in town before returning to his natural form. Despite his colleagues' concern, Edward stubbornly continues. In the final experiment, Edward experiences a more profound regression, transforming into an amorphous mass of conscious, primordial matter. An energy wave released from the experiment stuns Edward's colleagues and destroys his tank. Emily arrives to find a swirling maelstrom where the tank has been. She searches the vortex for Edward, finding him as he is on the brink of becoming a non-physical form of proto-consciousness and possibly disappearing from our version of reality altogether. Her friends bring Edward home, hoping that the transformations will end. Watched over by Emily, Edward begins to uncontrollably regress again, the transformations no longer requiring the intake of first flower or sensory deprivation. Urging Edward to fight the change, Emily grabs his hand, immediately being enveloped by the primordial energy emanating from Edward. The sight of his wife apparently being consumed by the energy stirs the human consciousness in Edward's devolving form. He fights the transformation and returns to his human form. In the final scene, Edward embraces Emily, and she returns to normal.
So there's been some comparisons for people trying to understand this movie on what it was supposed to be about. And some people would talk about how it's God and science, or it's supposed to be the story of Mary and Jesus, or Adam and Eve. So I'm just really curious. What did you think of this movie? Like, going into it, did you like know anything about this movie before you hit play?
So I watched the preview because I've been trying to get better at watching the original preview before some of these movies.
Right.
Whether I've seen them or not, I think it's just kind of fun to get a little...
It puts you in the time frame of when it was coming out.
It does. I was going to say that, yeah, historical perspective about what it was like to experience this movie when it was released. But
right.
So yeah, that kind of threw me for a loop. And dude, I'll be honest right off the bat, I totally didn't like this movie.
Nice.
Which is what made it. I'm so excited to talk about it because I know you were super stoked, and like I was like, man, I'm really not enjoying this.
Dude, I was like halfway through the movie, and I was like, I forgot how weird. I mean, I remember this movie being super weird, but like I was like, man, like when you're watching a movie and you're watching it for yourself, you're kind of just let yourself get enveloped by the movie. And with this, watching it, it's like I was thinking about you while I was watching the movie, and I'm like, I'm kind of almost feeling uncomfortable in certain scenes because I'm knowing you're going to experience this.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I love weird movies. I really do. I mean, my wife will tell you, I like some weird stuff.
Right.
And really, excuse me, really the only thing that was hard from I just don't like it in most movies is I don't like the whole psychedelic like mind trip kind of sequences. They're just not my thing. I know other people, some of my buddies at work, they love stuff like that, or they'll be watching it and they're like, bro, if you were on shrooms right now, this would be amazing. Right. And which is funny because that's basically what this movie is about.
That is the movie, yeah.
So yeah, it's just never been my thing. I mean, I've never taken hallucinogens. Anytime that I take any kind of medication that gets me a little bit loopy, I really don't enjoy it. I mean, getting a bit of a buzz from alcohol, that's kind of my limit personally. I just don't really like going beyond that. So anyways, that's the kind of thing that didn't really enjoy about this movie, because there's some really intense sequences where he's just tripping balls basically. And as far as like the concept and the pseudo intellectual science fiction they're talking about, all of that's super interesting, and the characters are super cool and interesting. But just what most of this movie is about all of human experience being in your genetic code, and then hallucinating your way into accessing that code, just didn't really do it for me. But
I watching this movie a second time, actually, it kind of gave me a better view on the movie versus the first time. I was like, what am I watching? And I like movies that just keep throwing stuff at you. You're just like, you think you've seen the weirdest thing in the movie, and because they're going to run out of budget or of just imagination, And this
Right.
movie just keeps going weirder and weirder. And so I really appreciated that the first time I saw it. And I actually thought at its core, this movie was a simplistic movie. In the case of this guy is just feeling alienated because of his experience of his father passing away and him losing his faith. And so he just kind of is floundering about in the darkness. And then like this movie, I feel like it's at its core is a love story. And because like with him going through all this altered states, going through reverting through his genetic code to see the beginning of life,
Right.
he finds love for his wife, and that's like becomes the reason for living, because she's like madly in love with him the entire time. Like he is freaking weird from like the first scene you see him. And
Right.
I really like that their relationship is weird. Like it's like they're just talking casually, and then he's like, "Hey, can I come over?" And she's like kind of coy, and she's like, "Okay." And then the next scene is like boom, like intense weird sex scene. And then
Right.
like and the music is fantastic in this movie because it really gives you that eerie feeling. It's like not quite
Oh, yeah.
scary, but it's like
Well, it's unsettling.
yeah, it's unsettling. It's almost like I would almost say it's almost like evil Gregorian chant almost, but like not quite. It's just like like that's I think the only thing I liked about the soundtrack is because besides that, the soundtrack is more used as a sound effect, I would say, than that. And so I like that it's just like he keeps going into the unknown, and then his wife is just keeps supporting him, and he's a total douchebag.
Right.
And like, but I don't feel like he's intentionally a douchebag. I feel like he's one of those guys that just he's so disconnected from humanity, but he's obsessed with finding out the reason for existing.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
she says it. His true love is truth.
Right.
And discovering that truth. But, and I think like you said, I mean, it does kind of show that his, in his great quest for truth in where did we come from? What does it all mean? He does, like you said, he does kind of at the end, it comes down to, hey, what's really important to me actually is my wife.
Right.
And my family. Because he does kind of piss it away.
He does.
During the movie, he ends up cheating on her at one point, even though I think they were technically divorced or separated, but so maybe he's not really cheating on her, but he's
they have that
kind of just
they have that casual of like, okay, yeah, we'll get married thing where he's really scientific about it, and then there's that 7-year jump, and then
Right.
that's when he's like wanting the divorce, because the one line that he says where he's like, a lot of people aren't capable of living through life with the pain by themselves, but he's like, but I can live through the pain of life by myself. And so he's like, I choose to do that so I can follow truth more. And so that's why like he wants to break up with her, and then they separate, and then and then of course he's just doing his own thing. And
right.
I just so I just felt like I really did. The thing that grabbed me initially about this movie, the first time I watched it, was just that it's a simple love story, and like I'm a sappy romantic, so I just like the fact that his wife is just there for him, keeps pulling him back from the brink, and you can watch the second time me knowing what was going to happen. I enjoyed, like, you could see becomes more and more open towards her as he keeps tripping out and going into the altered states. And because like he like at one part before the end of the movie, he says like, you have no idea how much you mean to me. And then of course the last scene in the movie when he says I love you, and then they hug, and then that's the end of the movie. And so I just like that he finally found, like, him going through all these altered states, it finally unlocked his ability to really perceive love in the now instead of as an existence. And so
Sure.
I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. I also thought initially they were kind of portraying woman as the original sin. Mm-hmm. Was sort of what I was seeing in the early trips he was taking.
Are you talking about like the first time that he does the first flower, and then like
right,
she shows up right there, and then they're like drinking and that looking like they're from Mary Poppins in the poppy fields?
Right. And then it just kind of, obviously they both erode as if you could say as a couple, as a relationship, them falling apart. But
right.
There is also, because I kind of got the vibe that he sort of saw her as like a hindrance to his work and to his life in general. It's like kind of a necessary evil. It's like, I want you to be around, but really you're just kind of in the way.
Right.
And that's where I was kind of getting that whole, in his experience and his psychedelic trip, you know, is woman the original sin? Because that's kind of a classic
right
argument for some. Anyways.
Well, the thing I thought was that I liked about this too is, first of all, I did a little bit of a deep dive into this when I first saw this movie. The science behind this movie is completely false. Like, it's completely science fiction. There was some theories about this, that this would could actually be, like, you could look into your genetic history by hallucinating and all that stuff. This book was written in...
Are you talking about, like, when they created LSD back in the...
Yeah, that in the 60s. That was
70s?
That was in the 60s. But yeah, and so they were looking at to see like what they could do, and even Mason, the doctor, talks about LSD trials compared to this,
right?
And he's like,
because they show that at the very beginning of the movie, because it starts in the 60s when they're finishing up their own schooling,
right?
And they show, you know, them giving dosage, you know, to kids to see what happened.
Well, you talking about the schizophrenic, the girl who, are you talking about that person?
Yeah, I'm just the early stuff they were showing.
Oh, yeah. The thing I thought was interesting about this, though, this does not feel like a 1980s movie. This feels like a 1970s movie. Like, the philosophy, not the way it looks, but the philosophy and just the subject matter doesn't seem like something that you would see in a big budget movie in 1980. I mean, this is the same year Flash Gordon came out. This is after Star Wars. This definitely seems like a psychedelic trip this movie seems like it should have come out in the 60s or the early 70s. And I think it would have done better if it did. It's a weird movie. It's a weird movie.
Well, I agree, because even they show it trying to be modern. When they time jump 7 years later,
right.
But for sure, the sweet spot is all of this was stuff that was, you know, at least in some science circles, kind of a, you know, groundbreaking, interesting thing to look into. Like you said, in the 70s, you know, it started in the 60s with, you know, discovering creating LSD and what could that do, and then going in, you know, further into the 70s and exploring all this stuff. So. You're right. It did come out in a time where it was probably a little bit passé already.
Right. I think so. It took Patty Chayefsky several years to research and make this movie, but it was kind of cool, actually. I didn't realize when I first watched this movie, that's what I took away from the film, was like, this is at its core, no matter how weird this is just a love story of how two people, you know, one guy finally comes around to like that he really does love his wife, and so I thought that was really romantic at the time. And watching it a second time, I'm picking up on a lot more of the themes and all the intenseness, because there's a lot that's thrown at you visually, like throughout this entire film. It's just like bam, 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 bam. Like it's relentless, and then like the sounds of it. And another thing that made me feel like that this is a 1970s movie is William Hurt, like. When they offered him to do this movie, he was probably like, okay, I'll totally do this movie, but only if half of the movie I'm naked. And so and they're like, man, sure, why not, you know?
Right.
So the fact that they're so open with like him just being like butt naked for like half the film for different reasons, actually I think isn't just him and his wife. Like, I don't think that's actually in a strange way. I don't feel like it's sexual. I feel like it's primordial, where it's actually part of the story. Like, this is like they keep wanting to talk about the beginning of life, and so I feel like it actually, all of the scenes and stuff like that makes sense in this film. It's not just like gratuitous nudity that's put in here and just because we want to see some nudity. Like, I feel like it actually makes sense in the movie, like, especially with him, just like his view of the world, and like where he's like, none of this matters because his father, the last thing his father said before he died was terrible, and then he lost his faith. I just thought that was interesting, though, that the thing that grabbed me about this movie the first time is because I don't really watch movies that really dive into. At the time, I didn't watch movies. I do now, but dive into religious dark religious things. Like I would normally, back in the day, I would stay away from movies like The
Yeah.
Exorcist or just like anything that had to do with like demonic stuff or potential
Right.
cult movies.
Well, you
and
don't
stuff.
want to. You don't want to lose your faith. I mean,
Right.
good Lord.
Right. And yeah, and so now I've definitely, like I'm strong in my personal beliefs as a practicing Christian now, where I'm like, I know where I stand. I've gone through the deconstruction of my faith, and then like now I have a new understanding of what I actually believe personally for me, not just for what my parents taught me growing up. And
Right.
so watching these movies, they don't affect me in a certain way because I'm okay to exploring these different thoughts and things because I know what I believe. And so
Right.
watching this the second time, I thought it was interesting how like the first not level, but the first layer of human subconsciousness is religious things. And so like they show, for example, the sheep that has like the 7 eyes, and then like the crucifix and all that weird religious.
Right. Well, it was very Book of Revelations, end times, apocalypse kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right. And so with that, like for example, like when they administer the drug to the girl who's schizophrenic at the beginning, and they're like, "What do you see?" And she's like, I see Christ." And she's like,
Right.
like calms her down and focuses in. And this movie is ballsy in the case of it's basically saying that like religious experiences is just like the first subconsciousness in our mind that potentially
Right.
that's not any
Just a
deeper
way
than that.
Right, and it's just a way of dealing and coping, which
Right.
is, I forget who said religion is the opiate of the masses. Another popular worldview on why religion
Right.
exists.
Right. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. I mean, it makes sense though. It definitely feels like a counterculture movie, which again, I'm surprised this movie didn't do better, but I think it's because it was just the time frame that it came out. I think it was,
Right.
I think too
people
late.
were right. They were kind of done with that whole thing. Like, really, dude? It's just about taking shrooms. Like,
Right.
We're kind of over that.
Exactly.
It's all about cocaine now. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. You're absolutely right. But yeah,
I want to get ripped, bro. I want to
Right.
do stuff. I don't want to sit around.
well, it's funny you talking about how you never took hallucinogenics. Like I never did either when I was partying. It scared me, the idea of taking acid or doing like shrooms has always sounded interesting, but like I never did because I didn't like the idea of losing control. But
Right.
I have some friends where they're like, dude, I love it. Like you don't even know what you're going to see, and you're going to experience things that make and just so like I totally get why some people chase that unknown to try to figure out what's going on. And I don't really feel like this movie actually answers the question of what is the point of life or anything. It's actually, if you look into it, potentially William Hurt, like at the end, I guess the only thing he understands is like life doesn't really matter, so just be with the ones that you love, which is kind of a dark sort of thing. But I feel like they didn't really answer that question. The movie was more about focusing on him realizing how much that he actually cared about his wife, the more that
Sure.
his humanity was stripped away as he kept going through the genetic structure of his own personal history. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's 100%. It's just science fiction. It's very, and I did enjoy the science fiction part of it. It's total bananas, but it was still fun. It's a cool concept for sure.
yeah, and that's one thing I
It
really
was
liked.
it was
about
just him showing, I mean, cinematically them breaking down what it was like to experience, de-evolving and going through all of that crazy stuff. That's just not my cup of tea, but it still was a cool idea. And like you said, if this movie had come out probably even 5 years earlier, it probably would have done a lot better.
Right.
Because that was definitely more of a pop cultural thing than
Right.
it was in 80. I mean, sci-fi definitely was kind of blowing up. I mean, you had just had Alien come out, like you said. I mean, Star Wars in a pop culture sense, was
Right.
the epitome of sci-fi. It's very tame sci-fi, but
right.
like a good gateway drug into deeper sci-fi, which this is some kind of hardcore sci-fi.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But it's psychedelic sci-fi, and so if it had more of if for some reason it turns out like the flowers were from aliens or blah blah blah, something like that, I think that actually would have the movie would have done better in the 80s, because like you said, people were starting to get really interested in alien sci-fi.
Right.
And and this is psychedelic sci-fi. Which, speaking of
Right.
sci-fi, I just want to do shout out to Blair Brown, who plays Emily Jessup, William Hurt's wife in this movie. The first thing I ever saw her in was Fringe. She's like one of the main characters in Fringe. She's much older, and she's freaking legit in that. Did you ever watch that show?
I did. I unfortunately I still have to watch the second half of the last season. I've never gone back and finished it.
Oh man,
I was super into that show, kind of after the fact, but I just remember tearing through it and I loved it. And I think it was back when everybody was using like Pirate Bay and open source kind of,
right,
illegal downloading, all that good stuff.
Right, and they were
seeding movies. At the time, right. So at the time, it was what my buddies at work were giving me, and I hadn't seen the second half just because they hadn't downloaded it yet, and then I just never went back. And it's been on, obviously different actual streaming sites that I pay for now, but I've just never gone back and finished it. But
right,
who was she? I can't remember what character she played.
Forgot her name in the movie in the show, but she was the person who was the lead. Who seemed like she was the leader of the corporation that they're working for, and then she's got the robotic arm. You remember her? And she thinks she's a bad guy, and then spoilers for Fringe, apparently. Turns out she's actually a good guy in the show, but for like 4 seasons, you don't know if she's a good guy or bad guy. You know what I'm talking about?
Dude, I don't. I do need to go back and just kind of re-immerse myself into that, because I remember loving that show.
Yeah, because it
was pretty fun sci-fi.
Yeah, like you thought that it was going to be an X-Files ripoff, and then they were like, no, we're actually something completely different. And
right.
Yeah, that's what I loved, and I also loved too. Fringe will give you, it'll give you an explanation for every episode, versus the X-Files. They were like, oh, it was protoplasma, apparently that really was a ghost, and let's move on with our lives. And you're like, what? No, like that's a huge scientific thing if we're looking at this in a scientific manner, which, I mean, that's why it's the X-Files. It's the unsolvable cases. But,
right. The whole point is that there's weird stuff out there.
Right. But then Fringe was like, this is Fringe science. And so like, obviously, I love that show as well. We could rabbit trail into that for an hour easily.
Right.
So going back to Altered States, I got some trivia here real quick. Do you want to say something before I drop some trivia?
I just want to make sure we talk about Bob Balaban.
Let's talk about Bob Balaban.
Okay.
Dude, I didn't even recognize him in this movie.
I know, dude. Well, one, he's got that awesome beard going on.
Yes.
But he's like this totally hip, cool, intellectual type, which Bob Balaban, most people, hey, if you don't know who we're talking about, IMDb him. He's you'll recognize a ton of things. Yes, he's always clean shaven, wears like round wire rimmed, glasses, just always the like kind of uppity nerd type.
Right.
And usually pretty intellectual. But in this movie, he plays like total, like, I don't know, like a hip swinging 70s like college professor. He's like this super cool dude. Yeah. With a big, has this huge like 70s beard, and he's just a chill dude. He's like a cool character. He's probably one of the coolest. I mean, William Hurt is actually pretty cool in this movie, but as a side character, this dude's awesome. It's probably the coolest character I've ever seen him play. Not that I don't like him in the other roles. He's just it is what it is.
No,
the other stuff that he does.
Dude, I totally agree. He's one of those guys who's in like every 7th movie that you watch, and I agree. I think this is my favorite role that I've seen him in, because you're right. He's just this cool, chill, down to earth scientist guy who. He's not stuck up at all. I don't feel like he's actually seriously concerned about his friend who is doing these crazy things to himself. And I think the casting was actually pretty spot on. Like the guy who plays Mason in this movie, Charles Hyde. I loved his character where he's like flipping out the entire movie.
Yeah,
but
he was very cool too.
But he's always there. Like he's like yelling at like you have that friend where it's like the guy's like, "You're a freaking idiot! Like, what are you doing?" And like, "You're not
right."
I'm gonna.
But
like,
he's got your back though. Like
exactly.
he's no matter how stupid and how crazy you are, he does try to back you up, and he is concerned for your safety.
Right. Like the first scene when they introduced him, I thought that he was going to be like, this is the only scene he's in where he's like, you know what, guys, I'm shutting you down. And then he's in every other scene for the rest of the movie, and you're like, oh, this guy's like totally not on board with what they're doing, but he's there because he wants to protect his friends. And so I thought that was a really cool character. I thought that the casting was strong, especially since a lot of these people were up and coming actors. And yeah, I thought that was cool. I think Drew Barrymore was definitely a scene stealer. No, I'm just kidding. She was like, I didn't know she was in this movie. She has one line. It's just like, "Mommy," and then that's it.
I know.
So, who knew that would be the beginning of an amazing career for Drew Barrymore?
Right. Which, I mean, it jumped off pretty quick for her as far as, E.T. and Firestarter and some other ones that she was in, early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I think E.T. was probably the breakout role for her.
I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, what trivia do you got? Let's drop some facts here.
Drop some facts. Let's see. So, looks like 1977, Patty Chayefsky was actually starting to research a project delving into the man's search of his true self, and that evolved into a project updating the theme of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Did you get the theme of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in this? I mean, I understand that, like, especially when he reverts into his primal form.
Right. I guess so. Yeah, I had read that as well. Mm-hmm. It seems a little bit weak, or I guess you should say it's sort of kind of like the opposite effect. Because in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he's like a powerful monster, rampaging around, and not that he's not. I mean, he messes stuff up pretty good when he's, his monkey man primordial self.
Right.
He tears up some stuff, but he's definitely not. He's not like a hulking, imposing figure. He's just this, kind of scrawny, ape-looking dude.
Right.
But yeah, I guess the bare bones concept of changing to a different person. It's there. Right.
I guess so. I don't see it really. But
I think it's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. It's not super clear cut.
I would say it's more inspired by, like, he read it and then took the idea and then did his own thing, and so it kind of
totally
it's born of that idea, but it's actually not really that idea. It looks like Blair Brown said many of the actors and crew actually tried out the isolation tank, and William Hurt actually hallucinated while Brown found it very peaceful. I've heard good things about flotation tanks. I know Joe Rogan's obsessed with that. So
right,
yeah,
it's still a legit thing. I don't know how I would feel about it, because I was in watching the movie. That's actually one of my notes. Is like, I don't think I would do very good in an isolation tank situation like that. But at the same time, like, I guess if you could get to a peaceful state, it could be very relaxing.
Right. I feel like I'd almost be claustrophobic in a.
Right. That was my initial thought but I think if I could get into a peaceful headspace,
right,
then it could just be very soothing. Well, like a womb situation.
I mean, since the tank is a sensory deprivation tank, so if you're floating and you just, like, all of your senses are basically turned off, and then you're allowed to exist without your senses telling you stuff, then that would be really intriguing. I need to try it just so that way I can try it. Maybe I'll, who knows? It might revert back to a primordial form. You never know.
It might. You never know.
Yeah.
Maybe this movie is true. Maybe it's not sci-fi. Maybe it's actual science truth.
Yeah, actually, it's based off of Joe Rogan's life. So, let's see here. There is some drama that happened behind this film. Apparently, they got Ken Russell, the director, to come in and direct this, but he and Patty Chayefsky were, like, not get along at all.
Right. Well, they'd already fired one director before him, right?
Right. Yeah. And part of it was because Patty was not allowing anybody to change even one word of his dialogue from his screenplay. He was really controlling, which, to be honest, though, he had won, like, 3 Academy Awards for screenplays by then. So, I mean, he kind of had clout, you know? Like, so it's
sure.
but
yeah. That's not the way to direct a movie, though. I mean,
no.
I don't know why didn't he just direct? If you're that attached to your vision.
Right.
Especially if you can't find another person to, you know, who understands you.
Well, I think it's because he was starting to get sick, and I believe he died pretty soon after this movie. And so this was his last project that he worked on. So I think that's why he didn't probably have the strength to do it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but I guess Ken Russell, the director, was like drunk like the entire time they were filming, which is a very old school way of directing. I know like John Ford did things like that. So, yeah, and then apparently looks like Ken Russell... Okay, this is one thing I thought was cool about the movie, which also stood out to me when I first watched this. It says, Chayefsky later said that in retaliation to them not being able to change any of the lines, that the actors were instructed to speak the lines while eating or talking too fast. And then the director says, though, that fast-paced and overlapping dialogue was actually Patty's idea. I thought that was cool. They're just, like, rattling off this, like, you know, really... smart sounding information, which if you really break it down, you're like, I don't know if you're really saying too much stuff there, but it sounds smart. And
right.
And I just like the intensity and how they are talking over each other, because to me that adds more of a slightly realistic feel to it, where it's like when I get excited.
Well, they sound like real intellectuals, though, or at least what I would perceive to be a bunch of super smarty pants, you know, highly educated people,
right?
Just kind of talking to each other like that. It definitely. I mean, our buddy Jake loves to say this quote, but it's kind of like they're the people that love to smell their own farts. They love sounding smart to each other and just,
right.
You know, stroking those egos.
Stroke it. Yeah, no, that definitely is what I picked up from this, and I liked it. I thought that was a cool little thing, especially when they're in like that Italian pub and they're just they're supposed to be tipsy, but William Hurt is clearly more than tipsy in that scene. But I like that. I thought that was cool. But yeah, apparently Ken Russell was having such a hard time with Patty trying to like backseat direct that he had him banned from the set. And so then Patty tried to have Ken Russell removed as director, but by then like the production was already on the way, and so then he wasn't able to do that. So yeah,
right. I thought the studio was like, we already fired one director, we can't do it again.
Right, and they were running out of money, so then they had to do the special effects on a smaller budget, which I thought they did a great job with the special effects.
They're spot on.
Yeah, especially for the time when it came out.
Right. Which is where, I didn't, especially the audio, it's very unsettling. What we were talking about that earlier, where the audio is, it's definitely more, the music and the sounds are more sound effect than they are scoring for the sake of some beautiful, emotionally moving piece of music. It's unsettling. It really bothered me. And I think that was sort of the desired effect.
Yes. Yeah, it's supposed to tell you, even if like something looks like it's like if you watch it with the sound off, then you're just like, okay, we'll see what's going on. But when you have the sound cues of like something's wrong, then and that's the feeling you get for a majority of this movie. And I like that, because like I think that William Hurt's character is unsettled since his dad died, and he's not comfortable in his own skin. He has to find something bigger than himself.
Right. And
so apparently the audience members and critics, though, they decided that the real part of this movie that was cool was the prehistoric man. That actually kicked off a 1980s cycle of movies, including Caveman, Cave Girl, Hundra, Iceman, Ghost Warrior, Missing Link, Luggage of the Gods, that's a good name, Quest for Fire, and The Clan of the Cave Bear. Apparently, people were really into the Geico Caveman stuff at this time, so I was like,
and you said this movie kind of kicked that off with the whole
apparently
primordial man.
This is the first one, so I was just like, okay, I've never gotten into those, but
see, I just associate those with like really bad B science fiction movies, or like Harvey Korman type stuff. Yeah, I know you're talking about Larry Corman. Larry Corman, sorry.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I totally feel you, which is kind of funny because when I saw that, I think of like Gore or like I'm trying to think of some of those other. They're almost like post-apocalyptic 1980s movies, but they're actually prehistoric, but they have the post-apocalyptic feel to it. Yeah. Let's see what else. One more thing we got here is so Paddy Chayefsky, he disowned the movie. So actually in the movie it'll say screenplay by, and I think it says somebody else's name. It's like Aaron something, which is a pseudonym for himself.
Right.
And they just tried to shove this movie out it opened on Christmas Day, and that actually I think hurt it as well. They should have put it out in like March or April.
This doesn't seem like hey, let's all go out on Christmas Day to watch this psychological. I don't know if you can call it a psychological thriller, that's the other thing too, man. I didn't quite get the horror aspect of it. It just seemed like weird sci-fi to me.
Yeah. I don't think it's really a horror movie. I mean, if you haven't seen any movie that's remotely close to a horror movie, then yes, this movie would be really scary. But it's not. I don't really feel like it's a horror movie too. I just feel like it's a really.
It's some kind of dark sci-fi.
Yeah,
but that's what and it's twisted for sure.
Yeah, it's very twisted. I guess I keep going back to it's just weird, like I can't come up with a better word, bizarro or something like that. I can't come up with too much work of the neuroscientist and dolphin researcher John C. Lilly, who invented the isolation tank and started taking drugs while tanking. Apparently, yeah, that's pretty crazy. He was a dolphin researcher, and so that's just interesting. But I think that's about it for background background trivia here. Anything else? Final thoughts before we go to final verdicts?
Well, as I got towards the end of this movie, I just out of nowhere was reminded of that movie, The Tree of Life, with Brad Pitt. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I did. I have that movie.
It's sort of similar, except I would say Tree of Life, as far as like an art house movie, is a very beautiful movie to watch, like cinematically.
Oh yeah.
But it is also a weird trip as well. That took me, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 times to work my way through that movie. Like I would start it and watch like 20 minutes of it. I'm like, okay, I'm done. And I would come back to it later because that was a weird one.
Well, let me just say, Terrence Malick's films are definitely not for the mass audience. They're definitely art house movies. The older I've gotten, the more I appreciate his films, and I need to go back and watch The Thin Red Line again, because the first time I watched it, I was like, what is this movie?
Right, and that's one that I've not seen all the way through. It was on at work one day, and I was kind of getting into it. It was very interesting, and I would definitely love to explore that one more. And I'm with you. If you got to know what you're getting into on that one. It's definitely not something you watch when you're kind of tired and you just, it's not a casual movie.
Yeah,
and it's funny how movie theaters had to put up signs saying, no refund if you come in to watch this movie.
Well, they sold it as like this 1950s Brad Pitt driven movie, and that's just one part of it. So, going back to Altered States, I like movies that question existence or just like what is the point of life. And so I enjoy movies that go into the thought process, even if they arrive at a position of thought that I don't agree with personally. I enjoy the experience.
It's a fascinating trip, and that's what Tree of Life was, and that's the only reason I bring it up is because they also were exploring the meaning of life and what does it mean and what's the point of everything, religion and life itself. So a lot of parallels there, and that's the only reason why I bring that up. And then, like you said, I mean, because by the time I finished this movie, to me, it was just like the answer to their question, loosely I could come up with, is that human love is the only truth.
Right, and I feel like that's actually kind of a weak answer to the big question. I mean, shoot, the answer 42 is a better answer, I think, than that. But so that's why I think it presents big ideas. It looks cool. It's really weird. It's not afraid of embracing the awkwardness of human shallowness, I guess I would say. But I don't feel like it quite lands the ending, and that's hard to do with these type of movies, to land the question of existence, because that's something that that we have continued to ask ourselves since the beginning of time. And so,
right,
like,
it's not a casual question.
No, and also too, that's something that everybody's arguing to this day. I mean, that's why there's so many different religions. That's why there's atheists, agnostics. It's just like you don't know, and so that's just
right.
Yeah, I understand. Like, yeah, you can't really answer that, but at the same time, though, since this is a science fiction movie, give us an answer. Like, come on, like,
yeah,
if
you're gonna take the time to dig yourself into this huge hole, you might as well. It's all fake anyways.
Right.
Like you said, you might as well just give an answer other than the sort of vanilla trying to make it a happy feel good ending of love is the only truth. I mean, okay, but
right.
you really went crazy, and then to just kind of come back to that does seem a little weak sauce.
Right, and that's why I'm saying it feels like a 60s or 70s movie of the whole love is all you need sort of thing.
Right.
Again, I think this movie, unlike certain movies we reviewed before where we felt like it was ahead of its time, I feel like this one missed its window. So,
oh yeah, and like we were saying, I think just by a few years. I think if it had come out in 1975 or 76, I think it probably would have been, kind of a phenomenon in a good way.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Because William Hurt, when he read the script, he said that he like cried for a half hour and then like just was silent for like 40 minutes after that, and because he said that it talked about everything that he had been personally asking in his life, which sounds kind of crazy, where it's just like I don't know, like I haven't read it.
But you think about it too, so when he read the script, it had to have been a few years before 1980, so right. It's kind of right there in that late 70s, which all of that was kind of a big, that was kind of a thing. So right. I get it. It would, but it should have come out then. And obviously, by the time it was finished, just because of production schedules and whatnot, there's no way they could have done that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's what I was saying, though. It's like for him, it was such a personal project. And, like for me, that just sounds funny, just being like, I've never read something and then just been so moved by it where I sit and cry or have such an emotional reaction to it. But right. I do react emotionally in other ways. But for him, it was a super personal experience. And he went home and he like memorized the entire script and then acted it out for the director. And the director was like, "Yeah, we can't make this movie without you." Which is really funny. I am not a huge fan of William Hurt, and I think that this is actually one of a better roles for him. Like, it makes sense. His character, he's not just slow speaking, quiet, more kind of quiet and thoughtful or whatever. But he's like, it makes sense. Like, he's an odd person in this movie. He is not normal.
Right. Well, I think he did a fantastic job, and he just seems like a cool actor. Like, he really could have. I feel like, you like the movie or not, just based on his performance, I feel like he could have become a bigger actor than he was.
Right.
I mean, right now, probably most people just know him for his roles, kind of, second, third tier roles in the Marvel movies.
Oh, I forgot he was even in that. Yeah, but like for me, yeah, like it's bad. Like, I know he's in other movies, like Body Heat was a big flick, and he's always the father figure though in movies now, where like The Village or Lost in Space,
the older kind of character,
right? So it was fun seeing him kind of as the young and sexy doctor who doesn't know what to do with his life. But
right.
Anyways, let's see. Any more final thoughts or anything?
Nope, I'm ready to let's do our final verdicts on this.
Are you ready to judge? Okay.
I'm ready.
All right, I'm excited. I hope you bomb this movie. So, do you think this movie do you think this movie? Oh, real quick. Yeah. Were you happy to see this movie in the first place, or do you think that you could have lived your life without ever watching this movie?
No, I don't. I'm glad that I saw it because I love watching things I haven't seen before, and I had a little bit of I had a lot higher expectation because you were so excited about it.
Oops.
So I was kind of bummed that I didn't like it. I wanted to like it just because you were so excited. So I was just kind of disappointed that I didn't like it so much. But I'll
try to play things down in the future. I'll be like, okay, yeah, no, it's whatever,
no, it's great. I for the sake of conversation though, I was actually on the other hand, excited to talk about it because we don't often review movies where we're coming from such, different points of view. The last one that kind of surprised me, and you weren't even really here for it, was when we did Hook.
Yeah.
And, me and my kids and Jake, love that movie. And then we just had a few comments that you had told me to bring up in the show, but we didn't really get to talk about it.
Right.
In person when we recorded it. So yeah, this is cool, man. I really enjoyed talking about it.
Nice. All right. So do you think that it hit its mark when it first came out in 1980?
Just based on the money it made and the reviews it got, I feel like it was kind of middle of the road.
Right.
So I would say a C.
Yeah, I'd have to give it a C as well because it didn't lose money, but it was a big budget movie, like for its time. I mean, $15 million, like that. Wait, did I say 15 million? I can't remember. Anyways, whatever the cost was, it was a lot of money for its time. And I think that was from the power of Paddy Chayefsky's. I think it was all him. I don't think, because Ken Russell was unknown in Hollywood when I think this was his first Hollywood movie, and I think it might have been close to his last. Like, he became kind of an outcast in Hollywood because of how him and Paddy were just such at odds the entire film. Mm-hmm. So I give it a C. And do you think it's still relevant today?
Oh, dude. Well, one, I don't hear anybody talk about it. Not that that means anything. I'm
right,
but,
right.
I tried to bring it up to a couple people when who I know are into weird movies or sci-fi and horror and whatnot.
Right.
And they didn't really know anything about it. So I don't know, dude. I'm kind of in the dark on this. Maybe a D, maybe an F. I don't know.
Give us a letter. What do you think?
I'm gonna give it a D.
Okay. For me, the question of existence, I feel like, is always relevant, but in this case with this movie, I'm going to give it an F for is it still relevant, because like I don't know anybody that's seen this movie. And It's not like it's this huge hidden gem. It's just, it so surprised me when I saw it after, you're going through, you're watching crappy movie after crappy movie, like, and just enjoying, the crap. And then this is not a B movie. This is definitely like a triple A movie that came out, and then like nobody talks about it. Nobody knows anything about it. So the fact that this is William Hurt's first movie, I was shocked at that. The only thing I knew about this before I watched the movie was I'd seen the poster and was like, well, that's a weird poster. Let me check that out. I gave it an F for is it still relevant today?
Sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. What was your personal enjoyment?
Well, I got to give it a D. I didn't absolutely hate it. I just didn't enjoy it.
Gotcha.
It's not a bad movie. There were certain things that I thought were cool about it and enjoyed, and that's why I didn't give it a complete F. It wasn't like, the worst thing I've ever seen, or, but yeah, didn't really do it for me. So I give it a D.
Gotcha. I honestly, I gotta give it a C. I was really surprised watching this movie again, and at how much I just did not enjoy it as much as the first time. And I think part of that was I went into this movie the second time expecting to really enjoy it versus the first time. I had like no thoughts on it. It was a blank slate, and it just kept getting weirder and weirder, and I was just enjoying the ride. And and so I think that's why with this one, it didn't hold up as well. And then also too, like I thought about it more psychologically, and if you look at it as a simple love story, it's pretty awesome because it's a weird love story, and that's why I gave it high marks in my mind the first time I saw it, because I was like, dude, this is a crazy love story. This is awesome.
Right.
And then watching it a second time, I'm like, yeah, that is the point of it, but the second point that this movie is enveloped in is the question of existence, and I feel like they totally just missed the mark on that. I feel like at the end they just tapped out. They were like, well, we don't really have any idea anymore to do this, so instead of leaving the question unanswered, which I feel like would have even been a better ending, then he was just like, no, the point of existence is just as I can't remember, the captain inside Prometheus says, where he's like, if you can't love the ones he's like, if you can't love the ones you love, then love the ones you're with. And I just And so, and then he goes to like sleep with the captain after that or whatever. I just thought it was funny line. But yeah, so this movie, I just felt like, yeah, that the whole point of this was just the 2 points. Love story, was good. That was solid. But then the point of existence, I gave it a D. So for personal enjoyment, I give it a C. I might watch this movie again, depending on if somebody's interested in watching it, because then it definitely provokes conversation, and I like that. I think, or invokes conversation, and that's great. That's one reason I like movies like this, is because then like maybe you don't watch it for enjoyment, you watch it for exploration of different people's thoughts and philosophies and matters like that. And so I think that so is this a midnight watch?
It is, in fact, no. Not even a little bit for me.
If you saw this movie on TV, you would get up and turn the TV off. No, it's not a midnight watch for me either. Yeah, but I do recommend this movie though. If you're into movies about psychedelic experiences, or just weird movies, or you want to
It's definitely that psychological sci-fi element is definitely there.
And I did like the whole idea of going back through your genetic experiences and like your genetic memories. I thought that's a cool concept. I'd never seen that before in a movie. And I don't think I've seen that since then. I think it's the only movie I've seen where I'm sure that they've done that in other things now. It's not a new
Probably.
thought. I hadn't seen that at the time, and I just like, oh, that's really cool. I like that idea.
Right. And I do know people that they're fascinated, interested in that type of I don't know if you can call it science, but the idea, whatever those concepts are. I do know people that like that. So I'm sure there are some people out there that would enjoy this movie. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I agree. Well, that about wraps up today's episode. If you want to check out this movie, come by my house and you can borrow the DVD. So I did watch it on Amazon Prime, though, just because obviously me having a newborn, this movie is freaking weird. And so it was easier for me to just watch it on the phone. Well, what about you?
I actually did the 7-day free trial of Cinemax through Apple TV.
Nice.
Which I gotta cancel my subscription today because I don't want to pay $10 for that.
You cheapskate. No, I'm just kidding.
It was awesome.
I do that too. All right. Well, special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. If you had as much fun as we did on this episode, we'd love it if you shared it with your family, friends, and anyone that you think that would like it.
Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcasts found on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and many other platforms. We'd really appreciate it if you'd visit our Instagram and our Facebook page. We're even on Twitter. And join the conversation on what is your Midnight Watch. You can directly reach us at themidnightwatchpodcast@gmail.com.
All right. Thanks, everybody. You have a fantastic week. And as always, keep up the watch.